Hi, my name is Nicole.
I'm Misha. We're a virtual Común.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. That is what we are.
Listen for my how.
So today we are talking about something that a lot of people don't want to talk about.
Triggers and blocks.
And how that applies to the things that you want to bring into your life. So we're going to imagine blocks and triggers like the weeds in your garden before planting your seed of intention so that it can grow and create into a manifestation, right? So if you want flowers in your garden, in your mind's garden, in your life's garden, you need to clear the weeds.
Like, okay, I have a really clear picture of what my intention is. I'm saying all good things about myself. It comes from a good place. And then you're like, where is it? What's happening? And then things start to pop up, and then you kind of go back to that same pattern of like, I can't do this. And that's because you haven't really taken inventory of your triggers and blocks. Yes, we've been friends for 10 years and like we're great for each other, but we call each other out like all the time. And we don't, especially me, like Misha's a lot more gentle in the way. She'd be like, well, have you thought about this? And I'm a lot more like forward of like, no. So it's, but having somebody like that you can have this conversation with to one, help you have a different perspective on what it is that you're doing. And then also to hold yourself accountable. I find that if I'm alone by myself a lot, I will justify anything to myself, right? But if I've shared it with somebody, then all of a sudden I have somebody that is accountable, that I'm accountable to, that will do check-ins. Like she's really great at doing check-ins. And maybe you just need to ask your friend or your partner or your sister.
Sibling.
Yeah, like, hey, can you check in with me about this? Like, I've been in a really tough spot. I'm trying to work through it, but can you just like see where I am in a week?
Yeah.
And that's really helpful as well.
When you are identifying your blocks and your triggers, one of the most useful tips when it comes to spiritual practices is clearing yourself and understanding that when you're doing meditations to clear, you're actually releasing a lot of physical tension, a lot of physical trauma, and a lot of emotional responses are going to come up from that clearing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think one of the most powerful things that you do when you have an intentional meditation that you're trying to clear blocks is that sometimes you go into it thinking, I definitely have a block around my throat chakra. Like I feel like I'm not communicating very well or something in that nature. And then you go into it and then you realize that a lot of these blocks and triggers were actually originating from something different that maybe you weren't aware of. And it's kind of a similar thing if you're doing therapy, is that you might go in and you're like, I hate my job, I'm really unhappy, or I'm depressed. And then as you start to talk about things, it's like opening a can of worms, right? So you start to become, you're like, oh crap, wait, who am I? And so that existential crisis is good. Like if you're in around that spot, you're doing great.
You're digging, you're doing the work. So one of those aspects is focusing on what the difference between a block and a trigger is.
And it's easy to get them confused because a trigger is something that will incite an emotion in you. And you don't exactly know where it's grounded from. So say you're at work and you've gone through like a breakup or something, and then your coworker is talking about her amazing relationship, right? Like how she's having so much fun.
And you're like,
ugh. And you're like, is he really that great? Like, don't you remember last month when he didn't call you, or you try to like pour salt on that person, right? That's a trigger.
Or you even want to pour salt. And then you're like, oh, one minute, I don't, okay.
Even if you don't say it, but you have that sentiment of like, yeah, right. That's probably a trigger for you because it's like a fresh new wound. A block is something that you're not very conscious of, that a trigger you also could not be very conscious of, but it's usually more in the surface. A block is something that is more encompassing. So it's like a larger, like a big mega trigger, right? And it doesn't always incite a big emotion off of you, but it's going to make it so that the patterns that you're following continue to cycle through because you haven't discovered that block. There's something going on that's looming over you that's making you act a certain way because you want to ignore it. And most of the time we become really, really great at avoiding our blocks because we've created lives around it.
Yeah, and it's almost like when you think about something that happens to you when you were little, something that you hated. So, for example, a lot of people have abandonment issues or abandonment blocks. So you have this idea that, okay, like this person that I'm really close to, like my parent, and then that later transpires to your best friend or your boyfriend or your sister, whatever. Anybody around you that does something to you that makes you feel neglected or abandoned or unheard, not validated, you're going to be like, I'm so angry all of a sudden. Or you're going to kind of retreat back into yourself and be like feeling horrible. Like you just want to crawl up into a little ball and you're like, what am I feeling? Why do I even feel this way? This is so weird.
Yeah. Or you start avoiding that person so that you don't have to go into it with them.
Yeah. And that's a really common block that we go through. And as you sort of go into your meditations and you start to think about your life and you're just encountering day-to-day things, my best advice always is listen to those moments. Like, don't just say, oh, that was a trigger. Like, oh, I feel so bad about having that. It's like, no, don't feel bad about having them. Just say, this is a learning curve. This is the lesson. Like, I just got something. I just felt something from there. That means I have to look into that.
And then get familiar with feeling uncomfortable. And then get familiar with feeling uncomfortable. And then get familiar with feeling uncomfortable. I think when you're in that journey of trying to discover what your triggers and blocks are and you're really trying to work through them, it's really uncomfortable. Because one, as soon you might, if say it's a trigger, like what I said about your friend is talking about her great boyfriend and you've gone through a breakup, right? One, it's going to make you feel, you're going to try to justify that for yourself. So you will say, but I'm right. He didn't call her last month, or like 3 months ago, she was talking about how he wasn't validating her. So her relationship isn't that great. So maybe I should say something because, she's living in this cloud that's not real. That's us justifying ourselves, right? And we do this a lot and we do this really well. A lot of you might know the term cognitive dissonance is we're acting a certain way and it feels wrong, but we want to justify it to make ourselves feel like we're good people again. So we come up with all these things as to why that's the right thing to say. And you might go through this whole thought process of like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. I do all these things.
You start to guilt and blame yourself.
Yeah.
And that's actually a better state to be in because at least you're taking accountability for what you're putting out there, but it's not a good place to stay in. You need to get past that and go back to a point of, okay, this is rooting from somewhere. I need to identify that place and I need to understand this thing that she just said about her boyfriend and how she's so happy about her relationship. It only bothered me because now I'm looking back, I have had a lot of bad relationships that I haven't been happy in. So her happiness is sort of triggering my will or my wish to be happy.
And then the block within that scenario would be that maybe you do this justification a lot for yourself and then for other people. And so then the people that you are attracting around your life, when they do have those red flag behaviors that you're like, oh, this might not be the best, you justify it. Oh, well, my partner had a really hard day, or, he's having issues with his family, whatever it may be, you start to justify it for themselves so that it feels right for you again. And you're in this pattern of always excusing someone so that you can feel better and you can see them in a better light. And it just perpetuates itself because you're not acknowledging what's going on.
And ultimately, when I say things that are going to be helpful to you spiritually, the situations that you feel drained in after are giving away your energy. You're losing energy from it and you're actually not being as vital as you can be. Those are the situations that you're going to feel heaviest. And that's when you know. Because a lot of times we get in our heads like, well, did I just justify that for him? I'm not sure. But if you feel at the end of that scenario that you've lost energy or that you feel very tired or weak, you know that was something that you had to emotionally give a lot of energy to. And if you're doing that consistently, that's unhealthy. And when you feel energized by somebody and even a situation where you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's okay. And, I see this reciprocation. And so I feel way better about this. And you're gaining energy from situations, then you know that it's in a healthy manner. So understanding the differentiations between the blocks, the triggers, and how to kind of clear that space for yourself. A quick practice that you can also do for this blocking and triggering is when you're going into a state of mindfulness, to be really aware that you're going into your body and physically identifying in points of your body where that feeling comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you're thinking about the trigger that just occurred and you're really angry about it, physically taking your hands, taking a deep breath and feeling where you feel that energy live in your body and just asking it, what's happening here? Like, why do I have pain here? Why do I have a sensation here? What are you about? And if you really listen to that, you'll actually be able to probably spark a memory or spark some type of associated.
Yeah. And even before that, when you are identifying emotions, being able to just be honest with yourself with what you're feeling, once you identify that, and then also knowing, like you said, where you feel it in your body, oftentimes our body will let us know before we are even conscious of what we're feeling.
So having different practices to help you, like I said, weed out that garden before you start to plant new things in is really important, because sometimes you're going to be getting something from your intention and your manifestation is going to come up and you're going to be like, hey, nothing has changed. I have more weeds. But it's because you've been focusing on all the wrong things and you're not paying attention to the things that are screaming out at you.
Yeah.
We hope you like this video.
Please validate us. Validate us in our journey.
Validate us with a big thumbs up. And if you didn't like this video, please just scroll away from it. But you've watched it to the end, so I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Check us out on the IGTV. And have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you hear and you want to keep the conversation going, listen to our podcast, Ritual Común Contigo.
Also check out our Instagram, where we have affirmation, oracle cards, and give a special message just for you.
Make sure to check out our website,
ritualcomún.com.
Inhala,
Exhala. Inhala. Exhala.
Has said